Hi there, everybody, and welcome to the Growth Execution Podcast. We are here every week to help you to build your business faster and better with the help of entrepreneurs from around the world. Delighted to be joined this week by Connie Steele. Connie of Flywheel Associates and a great author too. Connie, tell us what your book's called.
The book is called Building the Business of You, a system to align passion and growth potential through your own career mashup.
Brilliant. And that sounds super exciting. How did you get the idea of the book? What drove you to write it?
Well, it actually started about, 4 years ago. It was through doing my own podcast. So I'm a podcaster like you. And after doing some of these interviews starting off with friends, I started to notice this interesting pattern of how people were breaking through the inertia that they were facing in their professional lives, and realizing there was a really interesting approach that they were taking. And that just started to open up this other insightful perspective. I saw that there was almost a trend among particularly those that were growing into their career. They were looking at fundamentally a shift in how they were wanting to establish what they wanted out of life. So many of us probably have grown up with a very traditional, linear, sequential career growth and development model. Yeah. And what I was starting to notice in these really interesting interviews I was having, and particularly those that were skewing younger, was that it was a nonlinear journey. It was one in which it was about fluidity. It was about collaboration. It was multimodal, multidimensional. And there was a desire for them to really reflect their whole selves. They were testing and learning along the way. And so because of really, it ended up being over 100 podcast interviews I've done. And then my fundamental desire to understand what was going on with individuals and what they were searching for, and probably doing another 100 interviews of people there. I saw, wait, there's a perspective that isn't being told from an individual point of view on the future of work. Mm-hmm. As we all know, people are talking about future of work from a technology perspective. It's about automation. It's about machine learning. Yeah. It's about AI, or maybe it's about diversity and inclusion, which is wonderful, but not how we as individuals have started to shift our thinking, have started to shift our approach, started to maybe look at what we want out of life differently. Mm-hmm. And in particular with millennials too, that was really where I saw, wow, you know what? We have a generation that's about to really take over. They're going to shift everything. So that's where it started from.
That was the driver of it. And do you find, I was going to ask about the demographics and, whether it is a generational thing. Clearly, as you've described, it's the millennials that are perhaps very much part of this movement. Do you find it is also something that is you're finding in older entrepreneurs as well?
Yes, it's actually something that's quite pervasive. And I didn't realize that at the time when I was writing it. I was specifically and admittedly writing it for the millennial generation because I saw how many of them were struggling. And I had asked them, where do you go for resources? And that really, again, continued that journey. However, once I launched the book, what was so amazing is to see the resonance across the board. Because the reality is that many of us have realized that we don't want to be on this linear journey anymore. And many entrepreneurs have chosen not to be on that path. We've subsequently taken a detour and pivoted and have looked to find those experiences, those roles, really ultimately those things we're passionate about, so that we can reflect all of our talents and skills. It just wasn't something that was as pervasive as it is today. And you're seeing many people just quit now because that's kind of in the media. Maybe you're aware of that, but there's this term, the Great Resignation. So a lot of people now, in light of the pandemic, have recognized that, maybe where I'm at isn't the right place. I don't feel happy. I don't feel fulfilled. Life is too short. Yeah. Maybe it's time for me to make a change and take more control over what I want so I can achieve life work fit and not fit myself into work.
Yeah, brilliant. And what we've observed over here, and we do some work here at Groshen on business growth and a kind of index of business company growth. And there were 34% more startups last year than there was the previous year. So it absolutely plays to your Great Resignation and the idea that, these people are finally kind of realizing, perhaps from spending a lot of time with themselves in lockdown, and thinking, is this really where I want to be, and what else is out there, and what else should I be doing? So assuming that a huge bunch of people of those kinds of people are going to be listening, where do they start? What should they be doing?
Well, if this is what you want to do, is really take ownership of what you believe your talents are and where you can add value. It's simply a strategic plan. I know that might sound trite, but if you now look at yourself as a business, because you are now a product and service on the web, whether you like it or not, because in this digital age, right, they can look up anything about you. They're going to go to LinkedIn and say, is that somebody I want to work with or get to know? So knowing that, you have to create a strategic plan for yourself, because you're now the CEO of you, just like any business. And so what does that entail? There are really 5 parts. The first one is spotting the trends. That's just a research analysis you have to do in terms of what's going on in the marketplace. What are the white space opportunities that aligns with what you're interested in, where your talents might be, what your role is, where it could be pivoting, but also do that self-analysis for yourself. What are the environments that work best for you? Where do you add the most value? Where do you feel your strengths are? Because doing that, all that analysis, that's what companies do to figure out where they need to play. But you got to do that for yourself. And many of us don't spend the time to do that, right? So you do that. Then the next thing that should lead into building your plan. It's called creating your compass. So the reason why I don't use North Star or anything like that is because in this environment, in today's age, it's always changing. So what you may want right now may be different 2 or 3 years from now. To even say, what do you want to be? Where do you want to be 5 years from now? 10 years from now? That's kind of an irrelevant question, right? Because we know it changes all the time. But that compass is just that general direction. But you need to have a plan. You need to lay out those goals, objectives, strategies, tactics. So once you're clear, like, okay, I want to have that balance and fulfillment and the way I define it, right? Because now success is the way people define it, not sort of these narrow, singular definitions, which has been traditionally money, title, influence, power. A lot of times it's happiness, it's contentment, it's balance, it's spending time with your kids, but whatever it may be, it's individualistic. So you have to define that and then build that plan against it. Then the next thing is to get started. A lot of times what prevents people from getting started, because it sounds all great, you're all motivated, I put together my plan, fear, because it's change, right? So if you think of a company, there's something called change management, which is how to get everybody in the organization to be okay with something shifting. And for you, you have to go through that too. How do you push past this fear of possibly failing if you try? Fear of anxiety, fear of shame, because it's, again, you don't know what the future will hold and you're worried about what others may think. Well, you have to take a step back and say, am I catastrophizing? Basically, are you making it out to be much bigger than it really is? And do that self-analysis and really awareness if you're really just making it to be so much more. Once you do, you realize, hey, it's actually not that bad, because the outcome, the positive outcome, outweighs really the negative outcome. So just start with the littlest thing that gives you the least amount of fear to build your confidence. It's all about building confidence, right?
I think that's so true. And one of the things I observe with many entrepreneurs is that the desire to get it perfect at the start, and to kind of like, to actually sit there and every eventuality have mapped out, just in case this tiny fractional percentage chance thing happens. And that's not the right way to go. Yeah.
Exactly. In the past, that's the way it used to be, because it was almost that industrial line sort of approach where you really couldn't mess up, because one thing goes to another thing goes to another, and there was no do-overs. Now, perfect is the enemy of good. You have to just try because you have no idea what the outcome is. So it's so important to go with the flow. But that preparing for change is so important so that you could just move forward, because then the fourth is building your village. It's networking to build that village. It takes people, right? Everybody knows that. But it's hard because a lot of times it's uncomfortable. It feels very transactional. Folks may feel that going to a networking event, it's a chore. But you know what? There's a way to do it authentically, and you need people to help you. And that's why having your plan, though, is so important, because to build this village to help you, you need to be able to tell them what you want. If you're not clear on where it is you want to go, then these cool people you're meeting aren't sure of where they're able to support you best. And then the last piece is building those skills, right? We all know, oh, it's about building these capabilities. I don't have knowledge of X or Y or Z. And many of us focus on the hard skills, right? Yeah, it's not hard to learn. I should say it's not hard per se, but it's much easier now to learn design, marketing, product management, and so forth because of the options available. But what I focus on very much in the book is soft skills. Because in today's world, communication and relationships are so important. And if you don't build skills like emotional intelligence, because let's face it, right? The world is global. You're going to be building relationships all over the world. And if you can't connect with somebody in this way, like we are, it's going to be really hard for you to accomplish anything you want to do. So there's that emphasis of that particular skill, because the more you're able to build these really authentic relationships, the more you're going to be able to accelerate. So again, these 5 steps is really about research and analysis, planning, and then executing.
Yeah.
Which is no different than, right? If you're an entrepreneur and you need to run your business, like you've got to do the same thing. But, you know, in the case that I'm looking at, you got to do it for yourself.
Yeah. It's all about seeing yourself as incorporated, limited organization, branded, and out there. And I think it's so valuable to think of it and to kind of extrapolate that personal out into the business world, because that is exactly how people are looking at you these days, right? And how, if you are to achieve that kind of happiness, contentment, this is, you know, kind of the way to go, right?
Exactly. Because it's until you do the analysis of yourself, what you want, who you are, so that really all of us just want to reflect our whole self, right? We don't want to compartmentalize anymore. I think we've had to in the past, because there's just the standard, you know, work environments and the dynamics, right? In which we all went to work and we were in that work environment. There was really nothing else. We couldn't really have home life get in the way because we were physically gone. So we focused on that there. And then we came home and then it was home life. But because of technology and because of things fundamentally blending, work and home, personal and professional, are all intertwined. And the pandemic absolutely has exacerbated that situation, but not necessarily for bad, because we've all had to reflect all sides of ourselves. Like I'm a mom, so I have to flip between being a business owner and a mom at any point in time. And so many other people are doing the same thing. Maybe they're, you know, a caregiver for their parent, in addition to being, you know, a parent of a small child, in addition to being a manager, in addition to being so many other things. And when you're working in this situation, you can't help but be all of you, because that's just the way it is now.
And that kind of realization that every facet of yourself is now kind of part of the display. Do you think, or have you come across people for whom that is really difficult, and how do you help people to get through that?
I actually don't think it is difficult, and I haven't run across too many people who have fought that, because I think they realize that they want to. They just never had the opportunity to be able to, or really society hasn't made it okay, honestly, to be able to. But you see this fundamental shift that folks are saying, no more. This is who I am. And candidly, when you also look at the dynamics of the younger, you know, Gen Zers, right? Many of them are expressing their identity early in whatever form, where you see terms of being gender neutral, right? You have a lot of biracial children. I mean, there's just so many things in there, just identity themselves or personal identity of which they're saying, this is just who I am. And it may switch, they're all finding their way.
Yeah.
They're okay with expressing it
Yeah.
really early. If they're okay with expressing it this early, it's inevitably going to carry into their adulthood. And then we're like, well, this is who I am. I'm going to be who I am in whatever way I am, and whatever interests I have, I'm going to pursue that. And, again, you're also now seeing a trend in the creator economy. You may be familiar with that, right? So you've got all these individuals who are monetizing their audiences, whether it's on Instagram or TikTok or what have you. And they're just being them.
Yeah, absolutely. And thinking about the sort of short term to long term, and you talk about identity and the fluidity perhaps of that as you go through. Similarly, I'm guessing that if I am 20 and I'm looking 5 years ahead, that may be a different 5 years to when I'm 40 and looking 5 years ahead. So what you're saying is through this whole journey of you and the business of you, what you're saying is that there needs to be that kind of the ability to move into different areas as they take your interest and as you see opportunities.
Absolutely. One of the core themes from the book, but this is really, I think, a core theme now in the world that we're in, is the future is fluid. Mm-hmm. That's really it, where I think a lot of us have felt when they talked about the future, it's again about the technology or about diversity. I'm like, no, it's about, I think how many times have we all said this? We now need to go with the flow because we have absolutely we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, right? Yeah. Even in light of now things opening up and, we're having some more freedom and flexibility, but that hasn't ruled out potentially new things from happening. And so we're all getting adjusted to constantly switching from one thing to another. We could have had it all planned out, as we also know as entrepreneurs, you can't have everything all planned out. It just happens. And so you take it as it comes. But this comes back to having a plan. If you have that foundational plan, but yet realize it's going to be iterative, because each and every piece of experience you have is a data point. And that data point will help you evolve and dynamically iterate on that plan you have. So maybe one of the things you had as a certain strategy is to do X, but all of a sudden you met some great person to give you insight. You're like, well, scratch that. I'm going to go over here. My goal is still the same. My objective is still the same. How I'm going to get there is different. Yeah. And that's okay. Yeah. But if you're not clear on where you want to go at this particular moment in time, it's going to be hard for you to get traction. No different than somebody's entrepreneurial journey for a business they're creating. Yeah. And it's the same thing. It's just a skill that you have to remember to build for yourself.
Yeah, brilliant. And we spend a lot of time with entrepreneurs here in Growth talking about product concepts. So getting your why, and almost the how is secondary, is flexible, as you say, is fluid. But as long as you know kind of where you're going, the direction of travel, that the way you get there can change and flex as circumstances dictate.
Absolutely. It's so hard to answer your why sometimes though, right? It's interesting to ask the question of maybe the why for your company, but sometimes asking the why for yourself can be harder.
Yeah. And how do you help entrepreneurs to do that? What's the sort of, what's the go round for that? Because life purpose, what is my life purpose is a huge question. And in the book, Building the Business of You, that must be kind of at the heart of it, right?
Well, this gets back to, again, that very first piece of spotting the trends is really assessing that white space opportunity of what it is that you want to do. And part of it is also asking others that know you well, right? So one way to get there is talking to different people who have had different relationships with you. So maybe one is a boss, one is a peer, one is an employee, but one may be a family member, one may be a really close friend, but they know you from all these different lenses of you. Mm-hmm. And they probably have some good insight as to how you help in the world, what you're passionate about, what drives you. Because a lot of times, we all know this, just like a company, right? Sometimes you're just so in it that you can't really see outward and hear what your customers are telling you. So you got to go to the customers and ask them.
Yeah, do that survey.
So in this case, it's, You have to ask people who know you really well, and they can express to you sides of you that you might not have realized and help you thread the needle. You're like, oh, you're
Yeah.
right. This is what drives me. But sometimes it's also going back and thinking about what has always interested you ever since you were a kid, and see those patterns and really have that introspection. Because I'm sure in your childhood, through your teen years, through your college years, whether you're in your 20s, 30s, or 40s, there are definite patterns of things you've gravitated to. Now it's a matter of harnessing that, saying, what's the best place to apply it? Maybe it's already there, but maybe it's reframing it and saying, I never thought of applying this passion I've always had in this way. But yeah, it takes a lot of time. It's that analysis, just like you do, like, right, for a business.
Curiosity, exactly right. So thank you so much for joining us today. What I'm going to do is we always do a few quick fire questions, if I may, and really
Sure.
want to get the heart of the kind of launch process for you and your business as well. So what made you start Flywheel Associates? What was the kind of jumping off point for you into the world of entrepreneurship?
Well, interestingly, it was not something that was planned. For
Mm-hmm.
me, it was this desire to find life work fit, honestly,
Yeah.
because the environment I was in prior as a head of marketing for this tech company was really challenging. It was toxic, and I couldn't be the parent that I wanted to be, and at the same time grow in the way that I wanted. So it was a choice to take a different path. And my husband had started prior to me because there was a similar desire too.
Mm-hmm. Great. And what kind of, who do you have as a sort of inspiration, if anybody? Is there anybody out there that you kind of look up to and think that's that whole ethos, the way that person goes about things is inspiration?
I can't say there's an individual person.
Mm-hmm.
It's really been all these amazing people that I've met through the podcasts that I've done who've had such a unique journey, an interesting perspective of how they have shifted and pivoted their career, which might have been a traditional corporate one, into charting their own course. And I get so much inspiration by seeing the diversity of people, yet the similarities and how they approached it, where it was this need to chart their own course because something didn't feel quite right, really define success in their own way versus really that traditional way. And so the grit that they had, the gumption, um, just saying, you know what? What's the worst that can happen? I have to push past my own fear. I'm going to give it a shot. It's better that I do it now versus when I'm significantly older, it's going to be harder to do. Let me give it a try. Right.
Yeah.
And
Right.
so every time I have the opportunity to meet really great people who have charted a different course, it gives me the fuel to continue to want to move forward. Right. Because we're not alone. For anybody who feels this way, all of us have felt stuck in
Mm.
some form or fashion, and we're not really sure where to go. And there are like good days and there's bad days, high highs, low lows. All of us feel that way. And you just want to know that there are others out there who are struggling, but at the same time, you want to see, wow, they've been able to power through. It's that persistence that really helps you get through it all.
Yeah, the resilience, brilliant. That's so powerful. Thank you. What do you wish you had known when you started that you know now?
I'd say the power of second connections. And even from there, then you build the third connections. But there's this, I don't want to say fallacy per se, but I think when a lot of us start, we're like, oh, great, we've got these great first degree connections, they know us well. And, they're going to be able to kind of maybe be that launching pad. And yes, they can help you get started. But what's so interesting is that it is really these serendipitous relationships with second degree connections or people that you just end up meeting along the way, and you form these amazing bonds, and their openness to helping you and supporting you is not something you would have expected. You just assume, hey, the people who know me best because worked with me in the past, they're the ones who are going to lead me to wherever it is I'm going to go. But that's not necessarily the case. And I think the big thing is opening yourself up to having things be unplanned, I guess. Opening yourself to serendipity is really important. And having that belief, like, you know what? I will. It's a mindset thing.
Yeah.
I know something will happen if I continue to persist. You don't know that when you start. You just assume, okay, if I do this, this, and this, it's a journey. It's definitely a journey, and it's a mental fortitude. It's a journey of mental fortitude, I would say, more than anything. And so that, coupled with continue to build great relationships. You have no idea who you're going to meet, how they can help you, and have faith in the process, I guess, is what I would say.
Yeah, brilliant. Love that. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
The best piece of advice, I would say it's actually probably some of the things that I mentioned. It is, you can't control everything.
Well, you might want to.
Yes, you can't control everything. Believe you have to believe that things will happen, and then I think believe in serendipity.
Yeah.
For somebody who is very planful, very analytical, I didn't really even know what serendipity was until I ventured off into this, where you don't have clear-cut structure. You don't have, a specific environment that you have to go to. You just kind of have to let things happen and persevere. So I'd say that's probably the best advice that I've gotten.
Thanks, Connie. And what's next for you? What's the kind of, you've talked about the plans, you've talked about how people are building out their own selves. How do you see the business of you growing?
Well, what I hope to do is just continue to champion the message of this book. For me, it's a very personal mission that I took on when I wrote this, because I just felt that a really important lens of what was happening with people wasn't being told. And it is this, I think, fundamental shift that we're now redefining success as progress. And so it's really, I guess, what I wanted to continue to do is help people and organizations find that meaningful fit and support them in that journey so that we can bridge the gap between what may be happening within ourselves, where many of us have felt stuck, but also for those organizations where they're trying to bridge that gap between generations within their workforce and create that alignment that is so often missing, right? And so if there's a way to support really this kind of holistic ecosystem so that we can all move forward together, I would say that's kind of where I'm moving forward. So whether that is obviously continuing to promote the book, we have coursework that we're helping people with, but speaking about it and supporting organizations, and I'd say that's probably it there. And then obviously with other things in business.
Fantastic. Connie Steele, thank you so much for being part of the Growth Execution podcast this week. The book is called Building the Business of You. Really great, as you've heard, so powerful about helping entrepreneurs to really get themselves into the forefront of how they build their lives up. So thank you for sharing all you have this week, and all the very best with you going forwards.
Thank you so much for having me.
A genuine pleasure. If people wanted to get in touch, Connie, how do they do that?
Sure. The best way probably to get in touch with me is through LinkedIn. So you can look me up, Connie, Connie Steele, Stele. I'm also on Instagram at Connie Wang Steele, so you can reach out to me there. And if you want to check out the book, go to bizofyou.co, bizofyou.
Brilliant. We will make sure that those contacts are available on the podcast too. So thanks once more, and the very best of luck with it. That has been the Growth Execution podcast for this week. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will be back again next week with even more on how to help you to build and to grow your business out. So thanks a lot, and have a great growth week.